Can I just ask you, because today the story is really bad about Israel and Hezbollah. We've already seen that more than 270 have been killed in today alone and more than 1,000 injured. You have hundreds of peacekeepers in that very, very tense area along the border between Israel and Lebanon. Is there anything that you're hearing that can de-escalate this, or is this now all-out war?
I think what we've seen today is an extraordinarily dangerous situation. We have seen effectively the opening of a potentially catastrophic second front in terms of the war in the Middle East. We're also seeing civilians being targeted again. You know, we're not seeing a targeted response to terrorism here. What we're actually seeing is, amongst those dead so far, at least 21 children now confirmed dead as well, at least 1,000 people injured. So the pattern, unfortunately, of flouting international law and disregard for rules of engagement in terms of protecting civilians is yet again being completely and utterly disregarded. It's a really, really dangerous situation. I'm pleased to say that our peacekeepers are safe and are secure, but it's the civilians who don't have the ability to defend themselves, don't have the ability to protect themselves, that I'm really, really concerned of. We should be here at the United Nations this week talking about de-escalation, and instead we're going to be meeting at a UN General Assembly against the backdrop of escalation. And
do you think, some have suggested, including American officials, that actually this General Assembly could inflame the situation there rather than de-escalate, depending on various, I guess, leaders' speeches?
Well, I certainly hope not. I think we have to remind ourselves of the very purpose of the United Nations. I mean, the United Nations was founded to resolve conflicts peacefully and politically. And I do think the world now, and world leaders as we gather here, need to ask ourselves about the consistent application of the rule of law and of international law. We cannot have a situation where international law must be applied to some but can be disregarded by others. Israel, of course, has a right to live in security and safety. Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself. Of course, Israel has a right to address any terrorist attack that it experiences. But that is not what we're seeing now. What we're actually seeing is a blatant disregard for international law, no consideration in terms of protection of civilians, and yet again children finding themselves caught up in the midst of conflict.
This is the Lebanon front that you're talking about. Now let's talk about the Gaza front, which almost has fallen off the front pages now, and people in Gaza are actually very worried about that. You, Ireland, took a very different approach. Months ago, you specifically recognized, along with Norway and Spain, a Palestinian state. You had a huge amount of pushback from Israel. You have, how would you describe it? Cold relations? Do you have any influence anymore, let's say, around trying to get a ceasefire in Gaza, or at least humanitarian intervention into Gaza?
So I think it's really important that when you have a foreign policy that you're consistent in terms of its application. Ireland doesn't define itself as pro or anti any one country. Ireland defines itself as pro-international law, pro-human rights and pro-peace. And that is the approach we took. You've got to remember, in our history, we know what it's like to want the world to see you. We know what it's like to struggle for statehood. And therefore we felt it was very important, at a time when others were trying to quash any glimmer of a two-state solution, to actually say to the people of Palestine, we see you, we see you, we hear you, we will not forget you. And we can differentiate very clearly between Hamas, a brutal, horrific terrorist organisation that offers no hope of a future to the people of Palestine, and the people of Palestine who aspire for the basic things we all aspire for statehood, for freedom, for democracy. And we want to see two states, Israel and Palestine, living peacefully side by side. That's why we did it. We're not a military power. But we do have an ability, I believe, on the international stage to actually say, no, hang on a second, if you believe in a two-state solution, the recognition of the existence of two states is an important place to start.
Before that obviously has to be an end to the war between Israel and Palestine. Is there any hint that you're getting that these stalled ceasefire negotiations over Gaza with Hamas can in any way be unlocked? And will that kind of fall off the agenda as a whole new front is being massively opened?
Being very honest, the world is not doing enough. We've got to be really truthful about this. I don't in any way doubt the bona fides, the effort, the tireless work of many to help bring about a ceasefire. I really believe that. I know so many people are working so hard to bring about a ceasefire, but we've got to be honest. You can try your best and it can still be ineffective. The reality of the situation at the moment is Netanyahu, for whatever reason, has calculated that he can continue. in terms of the violence, in terms of the brutality, in terms of the loss of civilian life. We as a world have to do something to change that calculation. And that's why I've consistently said at an EU level, it involves the EU reviewing the association agreement between the EU and Israel, because that has human rights clauses in it. In my mind, human rights clauses aren't put in international agreements to pad them out or to read nicely. They have to mean something. So I do think as we gather here at the UN, we do need to dig deep to say what levers are at the disposal of the world to change that calculation so that Benjamin Netanyahu realises, and Hamas, that a ceasefire must actually be brought about. And I don't think we've done enough in that space, being very honest.